Good morning, everyone. Hear what God has to say from the Gospel according to John, fourth chapter, verse 4 through 14. I'm reading from the Message version of the Bible. Starting at verse 4, to get there, he had to pass through Samaria. He came into Sychar, a Samaritan village that bordered the field Jacob had given his son, Joseph. Jacob's well was still there, and Jesus, worn out by the trip, sat down at the well. It was noon. A woman, a Samaritan, came to draw water. Jesus said, "Would you give me a drink of water?" His disciples had gone to the village to buy food for lunch. The Samaritan woman, taken aback, asked, "How come you, a Jew, are asking me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink?" Sorry. Jews in those days wouldn't be caught dead talking to Samaritans. Jesus answered, "If you knew the generosity of God and who I am, you would be asking me for a drink, and I would give you fresh living water." The woman said, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with, and this well is deep. So how are you going to get this living water? Are you a better man than our ancestor Jacob, who dug this well and drank from it, he and his sons and livestock, and passed it down to us?" Jesus said, "Everyone who drinks this water will get thirsty again and again. Anyone who drinks the water I give will never thirst, not ever. The water I give will be an artesian spring within, gushing fountains of endless life." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. The title of this sermon is The Danger of a Single Story. The danger of a single story. In 2010, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie gave a TED Talk on the danger of a single story. She said, "A few years ago, I visited Mexico from the U.S. The political climate of the U.S. at that time was tense, and there were debates going on about immigration. And as often happens in America, immigration became synonymous with Mexicans. There were endless stories of Mexicans as people who were messing the healthcare systems, sneaking across the border, being arrested at the border. I remember walking around my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up to tea in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind: that abject immigrant. I had bought into the single story of Mexicans, and I could not have been more ashamed of myself. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African states and not with the colonial creation of the African states, and you have an entirely different story. The danger of a single story with John 4 is that we will never get to know this lady if we continue to listen to the false narratives that sully the reputation of this woman. In John 4, The story tells that Jesus was on his way to Galilee, but he chose to travel through Samaria to get there instead of navigating around it like all other Jews did, because the Jews hated the Samaritans. His disciples were with him, but they did not like Samaritans either, which is probably why he later sent them to the village for food. The Jews held power over the Samaritans, so they assumed license to other the Samaritans as half-breeds because they intermarried outside their ethnicity and their religion, which was in opposition to the command of the Mosaic law according to Deuteronomy 7:6. The Women's Bible Commentary also says that the source of enmity between the Jews and the Samaritans was a dispute about the correct location of the cultic place of worship, a problem the Samaritan woman herself puts before Jesus in John 4:20. The Samaritans built and worshiped at a shrine on Mount Gerizim, a shrine that competed with the temple in Jerusalem. The shrine eventually was destroyed by Jewish troops. All of this history colors the reason why the Jews hated Samaritans. In addition to the Jews othering the Samaritans, half-breeds, they went further to label the female Samaritans as perpetual menstruants. Can you imagine being labeled so that there is nothing good about you, starting from your birth? And because Samaritan women were never clean, that means were never clean according to the Jews. That means that anything that they touched was also unclean. So a Jew could not sit on a cushion that was sat on by a Samaritan without being defiled, or let the shadow of a Samaritan fall on a Jew. Then you're defiled too. And so it was also when it came to drinking vessels. It's in the heat of the day, and the traditional narrative would rehearse that the Samaritan woman was coming to the well in the middle of the day because she was shunned by all the people in her village because of her illicit or questionable character. But the Bible does not say that. This is an example of the danger of a single story. What's the story that the storyteller wants to tell, and why? The Bible reads that it was noon when Jesus sat down at the well. Jesus, who is hot and parched from the day's journey, sees the woman coming to draw water and asks her, "Would you give me some of your water? May I drink from your cup?" This woman, she was a Samaritan and a woman, and chances are that since she did not have a servant with her, she probably was poor too. And Jesus asked her for a drink because she has something that he desperately needs. And he has something she desperately needs too. But both of them know that Jesus would be considered defiled if he drank from her cup. It's not a good look that she's talking to him in public, because that's not acceptable either. Women did not speak to men in public. What do you do when everything about you is a problem? Everything about you is wrong. Your race is a problem. Your gender is a problem. Your class is a problem. You are a problem. When nothing you see on the news or in the newspaper or on YouTube speaks well of you or your people, how does that affect someone's soul, their self-esteem, their vision for their future, their dignity, their children? It is true that she had 5 husbands, and the man that she was with, she wasn't married to. He was a boo. But in all of my years of hearing this preached, this woman was blamed for having 5 husbands. Do you know that a woman could not marry on her own in that day? She had to be given away in order to get married. It's a paradigm shift. So 5 times she was given away to 5 men. 5 men who said, I do, but they didn't. And in those times, a man could divorce you, a woman, for little or nothing, basically. If a woman couldn't cook, she was at risk. If she had some abnormality that her husband wasn't aware of until she was disrobed, all he had to do was take her in the presence of witnesses and say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. And it would be done that quickly. She didn't divorce these men. She couldn't, not on her own, because her life was not her own. But who knows? Could she have been a widow? But the idea the church has spread to trivialize her life is that she was a loose woman of questionable character. But the Bible does not say that. And I'm giving voice to that. This woman actually had a theological conversation with Jesus. She reveals that she wants to worship God in the right way. And and that the issues that have polarized the Samaritans from the Jews have certainly been on her heart and mind for her to raise the issue with Jesus. How intelligent she is. She's concerned about her faith, and she's anticipating the return of the Messiah who would deliver. And she's concerned for her people and loves them so much that she ran back to her village and told them about Jesus. Does your story converge with hers at any time? Does it intersect? Yes, this Samaritan sister sounds like she's my sister. We share like intersectionalities in common. Race, gender, and class which would cause me to believe that we have more in common than not. We have shared concerns too. That means that instead of othering her, I will try to get to know her so I can celebrate her story too. Think about it, because her story isn't a single story. Her story is our own.